Greetings. I'm Brian Tuskin, your host for Cop to Corporate. Today's special guest is Kathy Lavinder, and she's the founder and executive director for Security Investigative Placement Consultants, or SI Placement Consultants. And this podcast is really for executive level police and law enforcement executives in federal, state, local, to understand what's the other side on the private sector job market and what type of jobs exist out there. So just going to Kathy's site, you could see they brought in executives for chief security officers, heads of global security, CISOs, chief information security officers, regional country security managers, geopolitical country risk analysts, and the list goes on and on. You can go check it out yourself at her website, and we'll have it pop up on the screen here. But I'd like to introduce Kathy, have her tell us a little about what her company does and how does it work? Because a lot of the executive officers I talk to, or police, they just don't understand, how do you get a job outside of the executive command from chiefs, deputy chiefs, captains, so on and so forth. So Kathy, welcome to Cop to Corporate. Tell us a little about yourself and your company.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate the invitation and this chance to talk with folks. You're asking all the right questions right off the bat. That's the first thing I would say. There's a lot of mystery, a lot of perhaps uncertainty about how to proceed. It seems so different trying to find that commercial sector job versus a very straightforward process when you're getting into law enforcement or moving up through the ranks in law enforcement. So hopefully we'll try to address some of those mysteries, make it seem less daunting and less challenging for people. But a little bit about me. I've been recruiting. I'm a headhunter. That's the common term. Executive search is the $5 version of what you might call me. But I've been recruiting in the specialized niche of anything under a big risk umbrella. So it's physical security, some information security, but anything that falls under those risk categories. And it also includes investigations and all kinds of intelligence. We have worked with companies and organizations around the world. I think we've worked on every continent except Australia, so that's on my to-do list sometime. We work across the country, and we work across sectors. So, in the functional area of security, it can fall in a lot of different places. It kind of has different nomenclature and kind of applications in different environments. So you have to try to figure that out when you're thinking about where can I apply my experience. And the first bit of advice I have in that regard is talk to others who've gone before you. That is your brain trust, your peer network. They've navigated this, and you don't have to recreate the wheel. You can go out and hear about their stories. And yes, their story might be different than yours. Their their end result might be different than yours, or maybe their desired direction might be different from yours, but they've all been on this journey. And while I know it seems, like you're kind of in the dark and you're just grasping at straws, you're not quite sure what to do, there is a way forward. And talking with people who understand where you're coming from is the first bit of advice that I have. And then listen to, Brian and past episodes of the podcast. Do a lot of reading about this. There's a lot written. I know there are entire books about this transition from the public to the private sector. So I would encourage you to read some of those. And then there are just generic sources of information. Forbes magazine, Wall Street Journal, many online publications have all kinds of career advice. And you need to wrap your head around all of that. Because you're going to have to get smart quickly in order to figure out where you can land, where you can add value. And at the end of the day, it is about you adding value to an organization. So the first bit of advice I have about how you can do that is really reorient your thinking. You're not the company cop. When you go into an organization in the private sector, you're a risk manager. You're a person who's going to be looking proactively ahead to help them manage things that could have a negative or deleterious impact on their organization and their operations, and of course their people. So start by thinking about how you can help them do that. And I always tell people this is a little bit of tough love, but I do think you have to realize it's not what you want, it's what they need. Now, they have very specific needs, and they're going to vary according to the organization, the maturity or size of their program, the complexity of their organization, let's say whether they're regulated or not regulated, whether they're large or small. They're all going to be different. So learning what their needs are is very, very important. And so the first thing you should do is start to see what the marketplace wants, right? What are they asking for? And when you read some of the job descriptions, you'll learn the terms of art, the way they described their needs. And so that's very important in building that baseline knowledge. And of course, once you have an idea of how people speak about risk and security in the private sector, then you're going to have to start developing a resume. And I can go from there, but I'm going to also pause and see if you have some questions, Brian.
Well, I love it. I love it. It's not about what you want, but what the employer needs. That is such incredible advice. So I guess for the listeners out there that are in an executive position in law enforcement that are looking to either retire or leave mid-career, what do you look for? Because let's clear things up. Kathy's not here pitching her business to the cops out there or the executives looking for work. Her clients hire her to find that talent. So I want to know that secret sauce where Kathy's calling you out there for that ultimate chief security job, head of security or director, whatever myriad of jobs that she has. What's that thing you look for, Kathy?
Great question. And you're right, Brian. You know, we do not work for job seekers. We work with job seekers. We work for employers, and they pay our bills. They come to us. They have a precise need. We're going to get a retainer in place. We're going to get an agreement in place. We're going to be paid no matter what, and we're going to work until we fill it. So those folks who contact me and say, will you help me find a job? Sadly, the answer is no. I'm working for the other team, right? I'm working for the employers, but do I want to hear about you? Do I want to know you? 100%. So when I first hear from you, hopefully it will be your resume. It will be a private sector focused resume where you're trying to put your information through the prism of what the employer could use. And I saw one today that said national security law enforcement executive. Now, to me, that misses the mark because companies and organizations in the private sector really do not have a national security mission. And that's not to diminish the importance of a national security mission. It's vital, but it's not what companies do. They manage risks, right? They're just trying to keep their operations going and to make sure that bad actors and bad events and things like that are not going to derail them. And, you know, if it's a commercial organization, they're going to have a profit mission first and foremost, not national security. And they also aren't looking for law enforcement executives, right? So many people think that they have to put the word executive in their headline on their resume. I would say don't do that, because what you're really doing is limiting your option. Maybe it's not an executive level role in the way that that organization defines executive. Could it be substantial? Yes. Could it be senior level? Yes. But it may not meet their definition of executive level. So don't box yourself in. So once I see a resume, I'm trying to figure out a few things. One, has this person got some things that they accomplish or they know or they can do that will be directly relevant to my client? Now, maybe it's investigations. Maybe it's like they've uncovered fraud rings in a retail environment, or maybe they've had to protect special events. Maybe it's a convention or an Olympics event or something like that. So they've got some physical security, event security, bona fides and experience. So I'm looking for directly relevant experience. You know, policing and law enforcement don't necessarily equal corporate security unless you find that way to make it equal corporate security, right? And risk management, as I like to say. So when I get into the attributes, I'm looking for high energy. I'm looking for somebody who really is embracing this, not afraid of it, not timid, but really ready to dive in with both feet, acknowledging that there are things they don't know, things they're going to have to learn. Some of them will be unpleasant things that they learn, but it will be the reality, the new reality that they have to live in. So that adaptability, that willingness to sort of put yourself out there and say, I don't know everything, but I know 85% of probably what you need. So give me a chance and I'll do it. So I think the worst thing that people ever say to me is, please find me that really cushy, well-paid retirement job. Now, you've missed the mark on so many things there, right? If it's a retirement job, tell me where that is. Brian, have you seen any retirement jobs in the private sector?
Well, some people make it a retirement job and they be shown the door really quickly. So
Yeah.
no, there really isn't. It's a second career, and that's what they need to focus on.
Exactly. There is no such thing as a retirement job. If you treat it like, hey, I get to go to lunch, I golf with the CEO, I'm there when the phone rings. No, that won't last very long. And I've done many searches where I've had to replace those people because they missed the mark, right? So you really have to be aware that you're actually going to work really hard. It's going to be perhaps more intense than you realize. And I know you think that you've been in some intense environments, and I get that. You probably have been. I have no doubt that, no one's going to say that law enforcement is easy, but this is a different kind of difficulty. This is a different kind of stress. Maybe your life isn't in danger every day, but your job's in danger if you're not delivering, because there will be accountability. There's no hiding, no flying below the radar, nobody's coattails that you can hang on tight enough to survive. You will either thrive and succeed on your merits, or you will bounce out and not succeed.
So, Kathy, one thing you brought up, which I really appreciate, that you weren't always 100% successful, and you had to find replacements for people that were unsuccessful. Just so my viewers would know, what's the do's and don'ts? I mean, you kind of talked about what you should be doing, how to be prepared. What shouldn't people be doing where you found them unsuccessful and they were shown the door because they just thought, hey, I ran this giant government organization. I could just come, put my feet up, drink my cup of coffee, and cruise on this. What a lot of people don't understand. You have staff, you have people as an executive in law enforcement, and sometimes you could be a one-person show.
Right. Well, I want to clarify one thing. Those times when I've had to backfill somebody who didn't adapt well, they were never my searches to begin with.
Okay. Thanks for
never,
clarifying.
I've never had that happen, thank goodness, because you have to evaluate it on the front end for that, right? Suitability, ability to jump in and adapt and fit. But frequently I get those discrete searches where, hey, she doesn't know yet, but they're on the way out. We need you to find their replacement. So that's the story. I think that it's a matter of recognizing that you've got a lot to learn and being honest with yourself about it, not biting off more than you can chew. One of the things I counsel people a lot is like, go do a deputy role or go do a functional head role, like head of investigations or head of North America. Don't try to go get the #1 job right out of the gate. There's just too much exposure, and they will see if you're not on board with kind of their work tempo, their culture, their communication style. There's just nowhere to hide, as I said before. So give yourself that chance to go in, maybe even as an individual contributor, And that's a term of art in HR, where it means that you're only responsible for yourself and getting your job done. I think those are great jobs for law enforcement executives who want to get into the for-profit world, or even nonprofits, let's say, because you can learn and you can do it kind of without the bright spotlight on you. You can make your mistakes in real time and listen and learn and hear the feedback and learn and grow, right? And so that's my advice. Be careful what you wish for, is something I often say to people. The other advice I often tell people is really make sure you understand what the job is. So many times people come to me and they say, I was sold a bill of goods. I thought that this job was going to be one thing. Turns out it's a completely different thing. Well, when you're searching for a job, if you have any investigative experience at all, I think you should bring your investigative and due diligence skills to that process of exploration when you're interviewing and learning about the people you'll be working with, the people you'll be working for, what the organization does, and what they need. Because if you really do your homework on the front end, you're not likely to get really a big misalignment there, and to be calling somebody saying, hey, they want me to do something that I don't even know how to do. That just means poor hiring by the company and poor due diligence by the person who landed in that job.
That's great advice. So one thing I want to touch on, because I have real world experience, you've given advice that maybe a law enforcement executive that sat in a high level position should, if they're on, because it's such a high degree of professional requirements in a corporation at the top job, maybe take a secondary, a deputy role. And as you go lower, here's what I found out: the higher you sit in law enforcement executive and the lower position you take in a corporate role, that gap is really difficult to comprehend or to accept, that I'm no longer, sitting in front of the camera and briefing, the press. I'm just an investigator. And I've seen law enforcement executives struggle with not being in the limelight. So some of my advice is, I'm not saying they can't be successful, but that's a struggle they're going to have to deal with. And I mean, what would be your feedback or experience on people being, say, a deputy chief or a chief, and now they take like an investigator role or an operations role? Have you seen success there?
Yes, I have. And I think it's a safer course. It's less attention, as I said, it's less of the spotlight. The bright lights are not shining on you. You can go kind of learn the craft of corporate security with less pressure and more potential upside in terms of, how you can really add value. Might your ego have to take a hit a little bit? Yes. And that's okay, because, you're playing a long game here, right? This is not short-termism. And it's not about, being able to tell your friends, hey, I am now chief security officer of X major corporation, right? It's, what? I'm doing something that was the reason I got into law enforcement. I really love investigations, or I love, threat intelligence, or you name it, whatever it is. But you're going back to your roots. You're rolling up your sleeves, you're getting in the trenches, and that is experience that you can then sell to move up, because you've proven that you're a team player. You're not just a person who's looking to, as you said before, put your feet up, drink a cup of coffee, and delegate. I just don't know any people in these senior level roles who operate that way. They're all quite involved in the granular. You simply, if you're a chief security officer and something is happening in the world, and it could, yesterday it would have been Ian or whatever, and your CEO calls you, you got to be granular. That doesn't mean you're not strategic 99% of the time, but in that moment when they call and say, what about our office in Tampa, right? You've got to have that information. You've got to be able to demonstrate that you're in the moment, that you're on top of the situation. And is that extremely tactical? Yes, but that's a part of every role too. And the people who can bring both strategic and tactical capabilities will have a good trajectory. I am 100% that that's the way you succeed.
Well, Kathy, you're in the business. This is what you do. So what you're saying is outstanding advice for the listeners for Cop to Corporate. So as we kind of wrap up this podcast, let's say you have a successful candidate that is a great fit for the client or company that you're hiring the candidate for. What are the steps once you get the offer letter? What recommendation would you give the candidate? Because I've recommended people find a good employment contract attorney to have discussions, right? Because it's almost like pro sports, right? Where you have an agent, it could be, contract attorney, just to ensure you have a good package. Because a lot of cops, they're just used to, or any law enforcement, it is what you get. It's a government job, right? And you have bargaining and whatnot. Very different in the private sector. So what would you recommend once somebody gets a job offer? What should they look at?
Yeah, I think that I would recommend that they read a book on negotiation, right? That they understand the fundamentals. Now, somewhere through this process, someone, whether it's in HR, talent acquisition, a recruiter externally or internally, has kind of laid out some information about the salary range. So there is some discussion around that. As a job seeker, I think you want to avoid putting a number out there and then you're anchored to that number, right? And you may have wildly overshot the number that they're thinking, or you may have undershot that number. So you've shot yourself in the foot at that case. So I would say once you have an offer, talk to friends in the industry to try to benchmark that number. I'm not sure that for, unless you have a really complicated compensation package, that you have to go to an employment attorney. But I do think that you should be smart on the front end about negotiation. I think that you can ask lots of questions, and you should ask lots of questions of HR at that time. And I think one mistake that I see people make when they're coming from the public sector is they don't understand all the components in a comp package. It's not just the base salary. So maybe the base salary seems light. Let's say it's 125. That may be ho-hum for you. But when you look at the long-term incentive comp, the annual bonus, perhaps a signing bonus, and maybe even equity or some other element to the benefits package, executive level healthcare, whatever it is, right? You have to look at all of that. There's cash comp and non-cash comp, and you have to look at it in toto. So don't be too quick to get hung up on a number. And then the other advice I have, this is more general, is if somebody approaches you about a job, have the conversation. Maybe it's not right for you. Maybe it's not the right location, the right sector, the time, whatever. It's totally fine. It's not right for you, but have the conversation because you're going to learn something and you're going to file that away for later for your benefit.
I want to thank Kathy Lavinder again for being on Cop to Corporate. You can find more information at her website, siplacement.com. That's siplacement.com. Until next time, we'll see you on Cop to Corporate. And for those of you that have not subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button for YouTube and let's connect on LinkedIn. Until then, take care.